Section 14, the childhood of Christ, on page 19 in your books. You'll notice that Luke is the only one who records something of the childhood of Jesus Christ. And so, in fact, there's nothing else really recorded. There are some some apocryphal, not apocalyptic, some apocryphal accounts of Christ. What's the difference between apocalypse and apocrypha? Okay, apocalypse is referring to that which is coming at the end times. Okay, it's that which is revealed. It's away from the secret stuff, revealed stuff. Apocrypha means it's from a hidden source, something that is cryptic. And so the Apocrypha, when we use that word, we refer to certain books that people think are supposed to be in the Bible, but that the Catholic Church in reality added on to the Bible much later on in order to justify some of their false teachings. And so those are what we call apocryphal, because we don't really know where they came from. In fact, we have some ideas that some of them were manufactured. When we talk about apocryphal accounts of Jesus Christ, we mean that there are certain unauthorized, made-up, fantastic sources that talk about the life of Christ, well, about the life of Christ, but especially about his youth. The only thing we really know for sure about his youth is what's contained in the scriptures, and in fact, the apocryphal accounts are really kind of fantastic, meaning that they're fantasy and very strange. So this section, Luke chapter 2, verses 41 to 52, deal with all that we know about the youth of Christ. So question number 70 is based on Luke 2, verses 41 and 42, which says, "Now his parents went to Jerusalem every year at the feast of the Passover, and when he was 12 years old, they went up to Jerusalem after the custom of the feast." So the question is, what is revealed about the character of Joseph and Mary that you can glean from that scripture? We had the answer A, yes, they were observant Jews. Okay, the false answers are they liked parties or they would take care of the business of God if they didn't have anything better to do. Okay, you'll notice that in the questions that we have in the answers, we get in all kinds of things that we want people to give consideration to. And so things like that will appear there in the context. Okay, so I will say this. It is important that there are 4 functions of church. You have evangelism, discipleship, fellowship, and worship. Now, for some people, worship is the reason that they go to church. And that would seem to be like, oh, that's the big deal. And by worship, they mean they want to get into some very emotional experience. Worship is important. But if you don't attend to the other 3 areas of functionality, you'll actually miss the actual work of the church. Sometimes people say, well, I'm going to church, and they mean they're going to go to the building where they're going to go and hold a worship service, and that to them is going to church. However, church is more active and more in session outside of the hours of 11 o'clock to 12 o'clock or 12:30, depending on how long that I get, okay? There's more church that goes on during the week than ever occurs in the building, or at least it's supposed to be that way, where people are as the church carrying out the business of the Lord, because that's what a church is an organization that carries out the family business of the Lord. If you don't have healthy evangelism, the church won't grow. We have a number of us, we're getting older, and guess what, younger people? You guys are taking our place. Emmanuel, what does God have for you in the future in his service? Okay, Alex, all the things that you're learning. Josh will talk to you later on. Okay, but if you're here in church, you're part of the church, you know, you're in training, and if you don't have the evangelism going on, the church dies. There's a very common problem that people talk about is, oh, that church has got all these old people in it. Okay, well, the reason why is because the young people were too foolish to hang out and to stay put and go to work for the Lord. They went out to serve themselves. And our challenge is always to go out for more people. That's one of the reasons why we have that Sunday school time. I was really delighted. Ariana is doing our granddaughter Ariana has a business class assignment, and of the people that I recommended to her for joining in, I was making these are good friends of your parents. These are good friends of your parents. I thought, wow, these were all good friends of her parents. They were ones who grew up and moved on, but are serving the Lord. And that's the way it should be. We're training up that new generation. So evangelism. Now, if you don't have discipleship, the church will be susceptible to the false teachings of cults and wolves in sheep's clothing. Okay, there are plenty of religious organizations out there, call themselves churches, and they're there to try to separate you from your money. Okay, or they're trying to get you to join in their program so they can keep the program going so that they can still have the power, and they don't have any real doctrine. And of course, you have the cults that are specifically set up for that. And you won't know whether you're getting a false teaching or not unless if you had discipleship and you were learning about the Word of God. If you don't have sufficient fellowship, you'll miss out on the power of prayer, the encouragement of other believers, the things that you can learn from the enriched experience of others, the opportunity of being a blessing to others, and the need to simply break down and enjoy the company of like-minded people and eat falling off the bone spare ribs. Okay. Like I said, we do good spare ribs here. And the time to sit down, there's other things we talk about. We got out there for the barbecue today and all kinds of conversation that can take place because you're there enjoying each other. And that's the power of fellowship. Now, similarly, an overemphasis on any of these others, of these areas, if you overemphasize them, they can create problems also. An overemphasis on fellowship specifically can cause people to see church as a place where they merely go to fulfill their social needs. Joseph and Mary went up every year not because they were looking to go to parties and fulfill their social needs. It took effort. It took effort for them to be able to travel from Nazareth to Jerusalem in order to observe Passover. They didn't treat their obligation to attend Passover as a party, nor as just something to do to get it out of the way. Because the effort that it took to go up for Passover, you had to travel far. It speaks of how committed they were because they made Passover a priority. Every year, it said. Joseph and Mary were not casual about their spiritual responsibilities. You cannot be casual when it comes to spiritual responsibility. You're responsible. Each one of us is responsible before God. It means you're held accountable. If we gave an assignment to somebody, they didn't carry it out, they'd be accountable. We'd say, so what happened? Where were you? Can you imagine the accountability people have before God? But they're like, la, 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 God doesn't see me. It's like the kids when they were tiny kids, go play hide and seek. Here's how the little kids play hide and seek. Right? They can't see you, so you must not be able to see them. I remember we'd play hide and seek in our apartment. We had this French glass door. That means it's all glass panels on the door between the living room and down this hallway. And I would hide behind a glass door. And the kids, when they're like Annie, when she was like 2 years old, that actually she was less than 2, just a little bit. Yeah, she was 2 when we moved in here. 2 years old, right past me. Okay, didn't see me. And that's how people think God is, that He doesn't notice them. Yeah, but people will give an accountability. You cannot be casual in fulfilling your responsibilities. All responsibilities must be filled with diligence, with carefulness, with thoughtfulness. You lose jobs at work if you don't carry out your responsibilities with diligence. And so Joseph and Mary, they took seriously their obligations before the Lord. Now, we don't have the same thing. We don't have to go to a temple to make sacrifices. Jesus Christ is the final sacrifice for our sins. But really, we should be attending to all of our spiritual responsibilities that way. It's not a question of, well, if I have nothing better to do. I'll have people say to me, well, Pastor, I'd love to come to church, but I've got something I've got to take care of this weekend. And I said, oh yeah, you'd be there if you didn't have that, right? People, they fall for it every time. You'd be there if you didn't have that. Oh yeah, of course. What are you doing next weekend? Okay. But then I would actually get the answer. Well, let me see. No. You make a schedule with the doctor and then you tell everybody else, oh, sorry, I got an appointment with the doctor. I can't go that time, right? But you make an appointment with God and then you tell everybody else, I have something else. I have a previous engagement. Well, they went up every year to Jerusalem, not as if they had something else better to do. Serving God should not be a matter of whether you have something better or not. You don't give God the leftovers of your life. You give God the first part. When you came in, I have some spare ribs that we froze from last time we had a barbecue. We didn't serve those to you today, did we? Right? You would have been able to tell probably. No, give God the first part. Okay, question number 71 is based on Luke 2:42. And when he was 12 years old, they went up to Jerusalem after the custom of the feast. So question 71, how old was Jesus when he was found in the temple? The answer is, okay, Emmanuel, he's ready for that one. Okay, when he was 12 years old. When he was 12 years old. Of course, it's obvious from the scripture there. Well, why not 30 years of age? Okay, why didn't we wait to hear 30 years of age? Well, some people think, well, I won't teach my kids anything about the faith because I'll let them decide for themselves. They get no direction. Now, you'll have parents talk about all kinds of subjects from personal relationships in marriage, okay? Or they'll scare them with climate change, and sometimes they'll even use kids for political purposes. You'll see them take the kids out, and you see the kids holding a sign, some political sign. What do they know about politics anyhow? Just whatever they had stuffed into them. Some parents think they're so noble, not giving their children any religious instruction, leaving it for them to decide. And so you want to have this, not wait till they're 30 years old. This was Donna's case. She's given this testimony. You're not the only one that I've ever heard that from, but they were faithful in bringing Christ into the temple. Now, did Jesus need to learn anything actually? No, he's God. He knows everything. We don't know exactly how he developed and what was going on for him as he was growing from an infant. But we know this, that you would expect that this would be the place where you would have the Son of God being a familiar part of as he's growing up, certainly setting him up for when he was older and going into his ministry. He would have been a familiar figure in those places. It's not also when he was 13, the age of being able to assume responsibilities of a Jewish adult in a bar mitzvah. Okay, not only that, but it could be somebody saying, well, I've got my kid, he's been to catechism class, he's been confirmed, and then they stop any kind of religious instruction in the Catholic Church specifically. And it's a shame people go through life with the theology of a 12-year-old and expect to make it through spiritually. No, Jesus was there as a familiar part of those surroundings before and after. Question 72, based on Luke 2:44. But they, supposing him to have been in the company one a day's journey, they sought him among their kinsfolk and acquaintance. So where did Joseph and Mary look for Jesus? I think I was going to call on Emmanuel for that one there. If he'd raised his hand, I got have gotten him that time. You raise your hand on another one, I'm going to call on you, even if they shout out the answer. Okay. Where did they look for Jesus? With relatives and acquaintances, whom they might have taken for granted that he would be with. They might have thought, oh, we're all traveling as a company, we're all family here. Okay. He wasn't hiding somewhere in the company or playing hide and seek. He was not an ornery kid. You got a lot of kids, they come out to church and we'll find them out in the backyard. They're hiding from everybody. Come on in, we know you're there. Because sometimes they go back behind those red curtains and then I have to get upset them because they shouldn't be back there and things like that. No, you can't imagine Jesus doing that, hiding, not being thoughtful of his mother and earthly stepfather. Sometimes people don't take searching for Jesus very seriously. We need to be serious in our search. They're happy to limit their understanding of Christ to what they might receive from things they're familiar with, whether it's watching holiday shows or other notions that are made popular in the media or the movies. We should be expecting to find Jesus in the place where the business of the Lord is going on. And based upon their response, they probably should have been able to understand that he was about his Father's business. Question 73 is based on Luke 2:46 to 47. And it came to pass that after 3 days they found him in the temple, sitting in the midst of the doctors, both hearing them and asking them questions. And all that heard him were astonished at his understanding in answers. So what was Jesus doing in the temple where they found him? You got it this time, Emmanuel? What's he say? No, it doesn't have, okay. It is, somebody else got it then? C, yes. Engaging in spiritual discussion with the doctors of the law. Now, the cleansing of the temple is something that was going to take place later. We threw that in there to say, okay, let's keep the time period right. The cleansing of the temple took place at the beginning and also another cleansing at the end of his ministry. But here he's just there asking the doctors question. While other children might be happy to play hide and seek, Jesus was openly interested in talking to the doctors of the law. I like it when kids ask me questions, and some kids have felt very comfortable. They realize they can ask anything they want, and I like when people ask me philosophical and theological questions. Some kids really have great questions, and it's just a delight to answer them. I never feel like, oh, kid questioning it. No, take every question seriously. They all need to find out. I liked it when going to college for studying philosophy. Both Annie and Bonnie would love to go out with me and my professor friend, because we would go out to dinner several times a year, maybe go out to lunch, and we would talk, and they just love to come and sit and listen to us talk. I want to be able to ask some kids sometimes, I see some young people out there, you go up to talk to them about Christ, and especially if in their group, they all have to show off to each other, or all feel awkward around each other, and they all have to try to escape the moment lest they feel put on the spot, and so they'll try to deny things. But I've thought of going up to groups of young people and saying, now listen, I've got this question for you about going to heaven. I wonder if there's anybody here who's very philosophical. Because there are teens that think of themselves and they recognize themselves to be very philosophical. They like wisdom. They like to search things out and study ideas. Others sort of stare at you with their mouth sort of dropped open, mouth breather, and they can talk about basketball and all they want to do is go play basketball or something like that. But there are other kids, they want to know, they want to understand. Well, okay, can God create a rock that is bigger than himself that he can't lift? If he's so powerful, does he have the ability to create a rock that would be so big that not even he could lift it, which would be a paradox? By the way, the answer is no and yes. Okay. The answer is it's a categorical error that's being committed there, and you can ask me about that later on, especially if you're into calculus. Okay. There's an actual answer for something like that. But young people, you have questions, you want to understand what's going on out in the world politically, you hear some stuff there and you're being swayed by it, ask questions. We'd like to answer them. If you have a question about the Bible, there's a lot of tough questions we can answer, some that you probably won't recognize, and so I won't have to worry about it because I don't have the answer, maybe this one or that one, or I don't have a satisfactory answer up to myself yet. We keep studying, we find out and discover things all the time. But ask the questions. Jesus was there, and he was there with the doctors of the law, asking questions and giving them answers, and they were fascinated by him. I can imagine he would be a Sunday school teacher's dream, right? He'd be there in the class and have things to offer. It's always sad when you watch a child who is so self-centered, though, that they resist instruction and then they avoid God. This happens so very regularly. It's such a shame to see that. You just want to pity them, and they think that they're winning, and they're just so losing at that time. It's such a shame. Question 74 is based on Luke 2:47. And all that heard him were astonished at his understanding and answers. So what impressed the doctors of the law? Let me see. We just asked that question. Okay. Question 75. What manifested itself early in the life of Jesus? Based on Luke 2:49, he said unto them, how is it that you sought me? Wist ye not that I must be about my Father's business? So the answer is, what manifested itself early in the life of Jesus? A, yes, his sense of mission and divinity. It was not his nature as a radical who challenged the status quo. It was not that. You know, you expect that of teenagers. I did not go through a teenage rebellion. Okay? I was happy to go home and go to sleep. Okay? I played sports, and it was not, of great interest to me. And I had an older brother and sister, and I watched what happened to them. So I learned from that. But it was like, I wasn't terribly interested in that kind of thing. But people that expect that. Secondly, some people thought of Jesus Christ as a radical. This is something that we will refer to several more times in our studies along the way. Jesus did not come along as a rebel in order to destroy the system of his day. In fact, I've quoted this in a recent study. I will say it now. It'll come up more times. He says, I came not to destroy the law. He came to fulfill the law. To the last jot and tittle, he came to fulfill the law. The least punctuation mark, he came to fulfill it. So B is clearly a wrong answer. He did not try to shake things up. He just came to fulfill his mission. It was not his ability to work miracles. This is where the apocryphal accounts come in, which report that Jesus did miracles, and they report that he could be quite vengeful. If the kids didn't cooperate with him, he would destroy them, make them get withered up. The apocryphal accounts are very strange. Jesus never presented himself as a maverick or a radical. He was one who had his focus was on carrying out his Father's business. Question 76. How did Jesus react to Mary? Based on Luke 2:49-51, he said to them, how is it that you sought me? Wist ye not that I must be about my Father's business? And there stood not the saying which he spake unto them. And he went down with them and came to Nazareth and was subject unto them. But his mother kept all these sayings in her heart. Okay, so what did he do? Yeah, the answer is going to be B. He tried to comfort her with understanding of God's mission. That's what he presented to her. Now, there are other times when what he says downright is a rebuke and something that he reproves her for. But here he just says, no, didn't you know I had to be about my Father's business? The answer is not C. He went home and did whatever he pleased. Okay. He worked with the family. He stayed in subjection. Now, about the time, let me see, this is for Joshua and Alex and Emmanuel, about the time that you want to go off and do whatever you want to as you're growing up, think of the example of Jesus Christ. God himself, who was the omnipotent, omniscient power in the entire universe, subjected himself to his earthly parents. I mean, here's the one who has all authority over all of nature. But what did he do? He submitted himself. He worked with his parents. Now, if your parents, Joshua, tell you to go out and kill somebody, say no. Okay, yeah, don't do that. Okay, we're supposed to obey our parents in the Lord. Okay, we're supposed to be maintaining a godly testimony. Okay, but if it's not something sinful, you'll work with your family. Jesus Christ, the God of the universe himself, did this. He submitted himself. Okay. Okay. Now, some people, in fact, I should point out that Mary took all these things and pondered them in her heart, just like she did when the shepherds came, and she took all the things that happened and she pondered them in her heart. She was observing all these things. She didn't quite understand how everything was supposed to play out. She knew that he was God the Son come to earth, but she was watching, and I have to say it's probably baffling to watch this child grow up. See, Joshua, do you have any brothers and sisters? Okay, now do not answer this next question. Just think this in your heart, and everybody else will know. Do you have any brother? No, don't answer out loud, okay? Do you have a brother or sister who's a goody two-shoes that's always doing things right, and the parents favor them? Okay, see why I say don't answer that question out loud? Okay, so just imagine if your brother, your half-brother was Jesus Christ. He really was the goody two-shoes, okay? He was the kid who did everything right. Okay, that was Jesus Christ growing up in that household. Okay, question number 77, our last question is, based on Luke 2:52, it says, and Jesus increased in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and man. So what characterized Jesus' life as he grew? It is his wisdom and favor with God and man. He had every reason to be impatient with everybody. No, we get annoyed. Remember I was preaching this morning about how that we have a humanity that is surrounding us. Okay, that can try people's patience. Imagine if you really are right all the time, if you really are 100% good. Imagine if you really do know everything and you've got to deal with people. Jesus had every reason to be impatient with people, but no, he worked with people and he grew in favor with them. They grew to favor him. And not only that, but he grew in favor with God. God, the Father, would bless him as they went along. Okay, because the barbecue, we decided to stick with just one section and just do all the questions here.